My husband laughed when I lost my job. So that night I packed my bags and left. Now he's the one begging me to come back. The shrill, insistent ring of my old landline. Yes, a landline. I'm that archaic, or perhaps just stubborn, cut through the brittle silence of my temporary apartment like a rusty blade. It wasn't this sweet, melodic chime of my mobile. This was a jarring primal shriek that demanded attention. I knew, with the cold certainty that had become my constant companion these past few months, exactly who it would be. My husband. The tone cue bitter laugh. My husband. The man who, a mere 8 weeks ago, had watched me crumble, my career collapsing around me, and then, with a smirk that still flickered behind my eyelids in the darkest hours, had laughed. I stared at the black, chunky receiver, an ancient relic perched on the cheap particle board nightstand I'd scavenged from the alley. The dust notes danced in the single shaft of morning sun cutting through the grimy window pane, illuminating the exhaustion etched into my own reflection in the darkened screen of my phone. My hands, I noticed, were shaking, just a little. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was the residual tremor of a body that had been living on adrenaline and raw, unvarnished grief for too long, mixed with a nascent, unfamiliar thrill. It was the physical manifestation of reactive abuse I'd learned, where the body continues to brace for impact long after the blows have stopped. The phone kept ringing, a relentless jackhammer against the fragile peace I'd been trying to construct. I let it ring. He'd leave a message. He always did. Long, rambling, desperate pleas, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of his narcissistic supply dwindling to nothing. He wanted me back. He needed me back. He had no idea what he had lost. Or, rather, what I had taken. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. The story doesn't start with a ringing phone. It starts with a laugh. A goddamn laugh. It was a Tuesday. Or maybe a Wednesday. The days had blurred into a monotonous gray sludge of fear and desperation. I'd just gotten off a Zoom call, a brutal, sterile execution in the digital age. My boss, a man whose face had once crinkled with paternal warmth, was now a pixelated grimace delivering the news. Budget cuts, restructuring, we wish you all the best. My severance package was a joke, barely enough to cover 2 months of our mortgage, let alone the stack of bills that seemed to multiply under the oppressive weight of our perfect life. I stumbled out of my home office, the laptop still burning hot on the desk, its screen a black mirror reflecting my ruined face. The air in the house was thick with the scent of his morning coffee and the cloying sweetness of the protein shake he always blended. He was in the kitchen, humming, probably scrolling through crypto forums on his tablet. He glanced up. That annoyingly handsome face, the one that had lured me in for 10 years, still smooth and unlined, oblivious to the chasm opening up beneath us. Honey, everything all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. He said it with a casualness that always bordered on dismissiveness, like my emotions were a minor inconvenience to his otherwise pristine day. I just stared at him, unable to form words. The silence stretched, pregnant with unspoken doom. He lowered his tablet, a flicker of something. Not concern, but perhaps annoyance at my inability to just get over it. Crossing his features, I lost my job. I finally managed to croak, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. My voice was thin, reedy, barely audible even to myself. And then he did it. He tilted his head back, a sound starting deep in his chest, rising, blossoming, until it burst forth. A full, unrestrained, utterly joyous laugh. Not a sympathetic chuckle, not a nervous titter. A hearty, belly-shaking guffaw that echoed off the high ceilings of our ridiculously overpriced open-plan kitchen. You what? He managed between bursts of mirth, wiping a tear from his eye. Oh God, honey, that's just priceless. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. Priceless? My career gone, our financial security shattered, our future a swirling vortex of uncertainty, and he found it priceless. I stood there, frozen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening, the clatter of our neighbor's gardener outside sounding like a hammer striking an anvil. The light, usually so warm and inviting in our kitchen, now seemed stark and accusatory, highlighting every speck of dust on the gleaming granite countertops, every flaw in the pristine facade of our life. Priceless? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, but laced with an edge I didn't know I possessed. Are you serious? Priceless? We're going to lose everything, Mark. Our savings are depleted from your investments. My income was the bedrock, and you're laughing. He finally sobered up, though the lingering amusement was still evident in the way his lips twitched. He tried to compose himself, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Okay, look, I'm sorry. It's just the timing. It's so you know? Always dramatic. He tried to pull me into a hug, but I stiffened, recoiling from his touch as if he were a burning ember. Come on, it's not the end of the world. We'll figure something out. You can just relax for a bit. Find yourself. Find myself. That was his go-to line whenever I expressed any ambition that deviated from his meticulously planned existence. Whenever I mentioned working towards a promotion or taking on a challenging new project, it was always, why stress yourself? Find yourself. Now, the words felt like a slap. No, Mark, I can't relax for a bit. I have Bill. We have bills. Bills that I was paying. Bills that you conveniently overlooked while chasing your latest crypto dream or venture capital opportunities that never materialized. My voice started to rise, a tremor of pure, unadulterated rage shaking through me. What do you mean? It's so me. What is so me about losing my job? Do you think I wanted this? He sighed. That theatrical, put-upon sigh that always meant he was about to play the victim. Here we go. Always turning it into an attack. Look, I'm trying to be supportive. What do you want me to do? Cry for you? It's just a job, babe. You're talented. You'll find another one. Probably something better. Less stress. More time for us. He gestured vaguely around the opulent kitchen as if the physical space itself would soothe me. The scent of fresh-cut flowers from the arrangement he'd bought just last week, a supposed gesture of affection, now seemed cloyingly fake, like his sympathy. Less stress, more time for us. I repeated, my voice now a low, dangerous growl. Is that what this is about, Mark? You think this is some kind of twisted gift, some cosmic intervention to make me more available for you? His eyes narrowed, and the mask of casual indifference slipped, revealing a flash of something colder, something I'd started to suspect was always lurking beneath the surface. Don't be ridiculous! You're overreacting, you always do. This is a blessing in disguise, trust me. We'll be fine. He picked up his tablet again, scrolling, dismissing me. But this time, I didn't let it go. Looking back, that was the first red flag I chose to ignore. Not the laugh itself, but the chilling realization that my devastation was merely an inconvenience, or perhaps even an opportunity for him. I saw it then, truly saw it, for the first time in 10 years, the complete, utter lack of empathy. His world revolved around, dinning that I was merely a satellite, meant to orbit and provide a narcissistic supply in the form of income, emotional validation, and unquestioning support. This sunk cost fallacy was a heavy anchor around my neck, dragging me deeper into the emotional quicksand of our marriage, telling me I'd invested too much to just walk away. That night, after he'd gone to bed, snoring peacefully, oblivious to the emotional earthquake he'd unleashed, I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the familiar ceiling, but it felt alien. The hum of the central air conditioning, a sound that usually lulled me to sleep, now felt like a buzzing threat. I knew with an icy clarity that cut through years of self-deception that I couldn't stay. But I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to unearth every single buried secret, every financial manipulation, every crumb of proof that he was not just neglectful, but actively parasitic. The forensic descent began that night, not with a conscious plan, but with a cold intuition, a primal need to protect myself from the financial ruin he had so blithely ignored. My first step was almost subconscious. I reached for my old, battered laptop, the one I use for personal projects tucked away in the back of a closet. The old machine, a relic from my college days, whirred to life with a familiar groan. I started with our joint bank accounts. Accessing them was easy, as I was still on all of them. What wasn't easy was making sense of the discrepancies. Small transfers? Initially, hundreds of dollars here and there, labeled investments or business expenses to accounts I didn't recognize. Then larger sums, thousands, tens of thousands, not siphoned directly, but moved through a series of shell accounts that only vaguely connected back to him or to companies with opaque names. This was where my tech-savvy friend, Sarah, became my shadow witness. Sarah worked in cybersecurity, a brilliant, cynical woman who'd always seen through Mark's charming veneer. I called her the next morning, my voice still raw. "Sarah," I whispered into the phone huddled in my car in a grocery store parking lot. "I need your help." "Mark, I think he's been stealing from me, from us." There was a pause, a soft sigh on the other end. "I knew it," she said, her voice devoid of triumph, laced instead with weary resignation. "That guy always gave me bad vibes. Too smooth. Too perfect." I drove to her small, cluttered apartment, the air thick with the scent of old coffee and soldering fumes. Her desk was a chaotic monument to technology. 3 monitors glowing, a soldering iron cooling in a stand, wires snaking everywhere like metallic vines. Silence in her apartment was punctuated only by the soft whirring of computer fans and the occasional click of her keyboard. It felt safe, almost clinical, a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom churning inside me. "Okay, Spill," she said, pushing a steaming mug of lukewarm tea into my hands. "Every single detail. Don't leave anything out. The smaller the detail, the bigger the breadcrumb." I told her everything, the laugh, the job loss, the feeling of dread, the bank statements. She listened, her eyes narrowed, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper covered in indecipherable code. "First things first," she said. After I'd finished, her voice calm and methodical. "We need to secure your digital footprint. Change all your passwords, 2-factor authentication on everything. Assume he has access to anything you've ever shared, anything he could guess." She then laid out a plan for the forensic deep dive, a roadmap to digital hell. "You mentioned those investments of his," she mused, tapping her pen against her lip. "Did he ever ask you to sign anything? Power of attorney. Investment agree. Immense. Anything financial that looked official?" I racked my brain. There was, this one time, a few years ago. He said it was for a joint venture with his old college buddy. Something about an insurance policy benefiting both of us, just in case. He handed me a stack of papers, told me to initial here, sign there. I barely glanced at it, trusted him completely. He had this whole story about how it was a tax-efficient way to safeguard our future. Sounded complicated, so I just signed. Sarah's eyes gleamed with a cold intensity. "That's it, that's our starting point. Dig at those documents. Any emails related to them, any scanned copies, anything." Over the next few weeks, operating in stealth mode, I began to unravel the tangled web of Mark's deceit. I started with old emails. I reactivated an old email account I hadn't used in years, and through a series of forgotten recovery questions, managed to gain access. There were thousands of emails, many junk, but some buried deep were gold. I found an email from Mark to his college buddy, a man named David Miller, from 5 years ago. The subject line was innocuous, "Quick Chat Project," but the content was chilling. It detailed a scheme to set up a shell company, Phoenix Holdings LLC, ostensibly for an investment, but primarily designed to funnel funds and, critically, to obtain a life insurance policy on me, with Mark listed as the sole beneficiary. Not a joint venture for both of us, but a predatory financial trap. Whispered, trembling. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the laptop when I read it. Sole beneficiary, he had taken out a policy on my life, making himself the only recipient of a hefty payout, using my own signature given under false pretenses. The tax-efficient part was a lie. It was a way to make sure the policy wasn't tied to our joint assets, making it harder for me to trace. The amount was staggering, enough to cover all his investments, and then some. The just in case wasn't for our future, it was for his future without me. Sarah, sitting beside me, calmly scrolled through the email. Bingo, she muttered, a grim satisfaction in her voice. This is not just theft. This is premeditated. Using your identity, forging your knowledge of the beneficiary clause. This moves into serious legal territory. Fraud, at the very least. Maybe even conspiracy. We moved onto his phone. I remembered him upgrading recently, leaving his old one in a drawer. It was password protected. But Sarah had her ways. She connected it to her machine, running specialized software, watching lines of code scroll endlessly down her screen in a blur of green text. The air conditioning hummed, a low, constant drone. I could smell the stale coffee on her desk, the faint metallic tang of old electronics. The only sounds were her rapid keystrokes and the soft whirring of the hard drive. After hours, she broke through. He didn't wipe it properly, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. Amateurs, she recovered deleted text messages, hundreds of them. Not just with David Miller, but with others. Unidentified numbers, vague references to the plan, the payout. When she finally breaks. There were also messages with another woman. Her name was Jess. Casual, then flirtatious, then explicitly intimate. Dates, secret rendezvous, plans for a future. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just financial betrayal. It was complete, utter dehumanization. I was an object, a means to an end, a source of income and insurance payout. This wasn't cheating in the conventional sense. It was a calculated long con. The most damning messages were between Mark and David, discussing how to subtly undermine my professional standing at my previous company. Mark had access to some internal company documents through his connections. He'd been feeding David information which David then, under a false identity, anonymously leaked to my company's internal ethics hotline, subtly painting me as incompetent or disloyal. Nothing overt, just enough to sow seeds of doubt, to make me a target during any restructuring, the budget cuts that cost me my job. Mark hadn't just laughed, he'd actively contributed to the conditions that made me expendable. He'd orchestrated my downfall, probably hoping that a depressed, financially dependent wife would be easier to control, or perhaps, in the worst-case scenario, make me more susceptible to a tragic accident that would trigger that life insurance policy. Tone Q. Disgusted whisper. The thought made my skin crawl. This is a lot. I choked out, staring at the screen, a mosaic of his depravity. The words reactive abuse echoed in my head. His actions weren't just malicious. They were designed to elicit a specific damaging response from me, to make me doubt myself, to break me down. And then he could swoop in, the rescuer, or profit from my demise. It gets worse, Sarah said, her finger hovering over another folder. Check these out. His personal expenses. She'd managed to export his spending data from an app he used, one that synced across devices. Lavish trips he'd claimed were business conferences, expensive gifts to clients that matched Jess's social media posts, thousands of dollars on consulting fees to David Miller for Phoenix Holdings, the same David who was complicit in the insurance fraud and my job sabotage. He was bleeding us dry, using my income to fund his secret life and his nefarious schemes, all while gaslighting me into believing I was overreacting to our financial precarity. The total value of the forensic descent and the information I meticulously gathered with Sarah's help was staggering. Over 5,000 characters of pure, unadulterated evidence. Every deleted email, every metadata stamp, every transaction log. I printed it all. Thousands of pages, the ink smelling acrid, the paper crisp and unforgiving. I stored it in a series of fireproof boxes, meticulously organized, labeled with Sarah's cryptic alphanumeric codes. This wasn't just revenge. It was a dossier. A weapon. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I confront him right away? Why didn't I just take the evidence to the police? Because this wasn't just about justice. It was about survival. And I wanted him to feel it. I wanted him to understand, truly understand, the devastating impact of his actions. I needed to move first, decisively, to protect myself from the financial wreckage he'd created and the psychological trauma he'd inflicted. I packed my bags that very night. Not in a fit of rage, but with a cold, calculated calm. I didn't take anything that was jointly owned, nothing that could be disputed. My clothes, my personal mementos, my old laptop, and the fireproof boxes containing my damning evidence. I didn't leave a note. I just left. The house was silent, dark. The hum of the refrigerator, a familiar backdrop to years of domesticity, now sounded like a mocking dirge. The heavy front door clicked shut behind me with a finality that resonated deep in my bones. It wasn't a slam. It was a quiet, definitive punctuation mark to a decade of lies. I spent the first few weeks on Sarah's couch, then moved into a tiny, cheap apartment on the outskirts of town. The smell of disinfectant and stale cigarettes permeated everything, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection of my old life. But it was mine. The quiet hum of the tiny, ancient refrigerator in my new kitchen was a comforting lullaby compared to the oppressive silence of my old home. During this time, I also sought legal counsel. Mr. Henderson was a cynical, world-weary family lawyer recommended by Sarah. His office was cluttered, smelling of old paper and lukewarm coffee, with stacks of files threatening to topple from every surface. The light from his single window cast long, distorted shadows across the room, mimicking the moral ambiguities of his profession. "So you're not just leaving him," he said, peering over his half-moon glasses, his voice a gravelly rumble. "You're orchestrating a full-scale financial and legal takedown." He orchestrated my financial and professional takedown first, I retorted, my voice steady, betraying none of the internal turmoil. "I'm just balancing the scales." Mr. Henderson leaned back in his creaking leather chair, the sound a mournful protest. "Right. Well, I admire the thoroughness. This," he tapped the stack of papers I'd brought, "is a gold mine, insurance fraud, identity fraud, potential conspiracy to commit economic harm. This isn't just divorce. This is criminal. My plan wasn't merely to expose him. It was to disentangle myself from his financial web, secure my future, and ensure he couldn't use his assets to prolong or complicate a divorce settlement. Using the evidence, we immediately filed a restraining order, freezing all joint assets, and requesting a full forensic audit of Mark's personal and business accounts. We also sent an anonymous tip, backed by some carefully selected deniable pieces of evidence, to the insurance company regarding the fraudulent policy and the regulatory authorities concerning his shell company activities. That's when the begging started. At first, it was texts. "Honey, where are you? Please come home." "I miss you." Then more frantic. "I don't understand what's happening. My accounts are frozen. Call me, please." Then the phone calls. Relentless. From his P, Rosinol number, then blocked numbers, then numbers I didn't recognize. The messages on my old landline, which I'd inexplicably kept, began to pile up. Tony Q. Playback, agitated. "Honey, what is going on? My bank just called me. They're asking about Phoenix Holdings. They said there's a freeze. This is crazy. I don't know what you think I did, but this is a huge misunderstanding. Please just talk to me. Come home. We can fix this." The next one, a few days later, his voice tinged with fear, almost a whimper. "Why are you doing this to me? I can't access anything. My business partners are freaking out. This is ruining everything. Please, I love you. This isn't you. Don't let them do this." Then the true times reactive abuse started from him. He couldn't control me, so he tried to control the narrative. He started contacting our mutual friends, spinning a tale of my sudden, inexplicable breakdown, my overreaction to losing my job, my irrational paranoia. He portrayed himself as the victim, utterly bewildered by my cruel abandonment. The sheer audacity of his gaslighting, even as his world crumbled, was breathtaking. But by then, I was insulated. Sarah and Mr. Henderson had prepared me for this. I responded to none of his calls, none of his texts. My silence was my greatest weapon. It starved him of his narcissistic supply, leaving him flailing in the dark, unable to understand why his usual manipulation tactics weren't working. The final message came last week. His voice was hoarse, broken, stripped bare of all his usual charm and arrogance. Tone Q. Playback, pleading, almost sobbing. "Please, I'm begging you." They've frozen everything. David's lawyers are saying, they're saying I'm facing criminal charges. My entire life is falling apart. I can't lose this. I need you. I need you to tell them this is a mistake. I need you to come back. Please, I promise I'll change. I promise I'll get a job. I'll support you. Whatever you want. Just don't let them do this to me. Please, I'm nothing without you. I'm utterly ruined." And then silence. Just the click of the answering machine ending the message. I stood there in my tiny apartment, the scent of cheap detergent from my recently washed clothes clinging to the air, the distant drone of city traffic a constant backdrop. I looked at the old landline, then out the window at the hazy city skyline. He was ruined, his schemes exposed, his assets frozen, his reputation shattered. He was facing fraud charges, potentially prison time. Everything he built, all of it predicated on deceit and mess, emotional and financial labor, had crumbled. And I felt nothing. Or rather, a complex cocktail of emotions. Relief, certainly, a deep, pervasive sense of vindication, but also a weariness, a profound understanding of the cost of winning. This wasn't a fairy tale revenge where the villain gets his comeuppance and the hero rides off into the sunset unscathed. I was scarred. The betrayal had ripped through my trust, leaving a gaping wound. The financial investigation, the legal battles, the emotional exhaustion of living in stealth, the slow, agonizing realization of how thoroughly I'd been manipulated, it had all taken a toll. I had dismantled his life. Yes, but in doing so, I had to dismantle a part of my own. The part that believed in the man I married, the life we had built, the person I was before the laugh was gone, replaced by someone harder, more cynical, perpetually guarded. This victory felt like a hollow one in some ways. I had my freedom, my financial security back, and a pathway to justice. But the bitterness, the residue of his gaslighting and emotional manipulation, still clung to me. I had survived, but I was also fundamentally changed. So here's my question to you, the moral jury of the internet. Given the full scope of his betrayal, the financial fraud, the life insurance policy, the active sabotage of my career, the gaslighting, the emotional manipulation, all culminating in that laugh, was my systematic, calculated dismantling of his life justified? Was it merely self-preservation and justice? Or was it a descent into a moral gray area? A revenge that, while perhaps earned, also exacted a heavy toll on my own soul? Was the cost of winning worth it? Tell me.